Welcome to The Plant Report, a radio show that educates about the green world one plant at a time. The Plant Report is a new educational resource about plants, herbal medicine, ethnobotany, and the human-plant relationship. Listen to our podcast, read our blog, watch our videos, and learn from experts and the plants. The Plant Report is a project of Sustainable World Radio and is hosted by Jill Cloutier. Thanks for listening to The Plant Report because every plant has a story. Our plant today is Chaya, common name, tree spinach. Chaya is a shrub with edible and highly nutritious leaves. To learn about this plant, I spoke with Dr. Annabelle Ford, an archaeologist and director of the Mesoamerican Research Center at the University of California. Dr. Ford is also the director of El Pilar, an innovative archaeological site that uses the landscape as a tool of observation. Welcome to the Plant Report, Dr. Annabelle Ford.
Well, I'm very delighted to join you.
Yes, and you were on my podcast, Sustainable World Radio, many years ago when I was recording it at KCSB, and we recorded you and some of the Mayan food foresters and farmers that you work with at El Pilar. Can you tell our listeners, before we get started on our plant of this episode, a bit about your work in Belize?
Well, I work in Belize and Guatemala, what I call the Greater Petén, and I started as an archaeologist, but of course I was naturally a conservationist. But as I looked at the stories that I learned as an academician about the Maya, that they are said to have absolutely destroyed the environment, how could something that we exalt in their beautiful architecture, their fantastic knowledge of celestial works, their artwork, how could they have actually destroyed the forest? And as I got to know the people that I worked with, they shared knowledge. And here I could find people who were actually using the forest as a garden. And I started realizing what I was mapping was what they are doing. And that's sort of the short version of discovering El Pilar and creating a binational park that I want to be a peace park.
Fabulous. And there are so many plants that you have worked with in Guatemala and Belize. It was really hard to pick one, but I decided today to talk about Chaya or tree spinach. Cnidoscolus chayamansa.
Chaya is the local term. And it actually comes from a Maya term, which is chai, because the Maya don't use terminal vowels, and it's glottal, like chai.
What are some of the uses of this plant? And I have one growing here at my house, and it is very unique, very beautiful, and really has a presence. Can you tell us a bit about how this plant can be used?
It is edible. And, there's a wild version. This is the tame version, I will call, because it's really not domesticated. But the wild version has leaves that I swear you could wear as a blouse, except that they are nettle-like. So if you put them on, you would just really be very, very uncomfortable. And evidently, and I'm thinking, the Maya or the ancestral people who lived in the Maya forest were there 8,000 years ago. 8,000 years ago was when it moved from cold and dry to warm and wet. So 8,000 years ago was a time when there could be chaya, but before that there probably wasn't. Likewise, there were no tropical trees. But as the Maya started, we can pick nettles. It's not comfortable, but you plant it and you do it right and you can eat it. That's how the chaya is. But you can imagine when they discovered one that didn't have the nettles and it was smaller, but the only way it can reproduce is by giving you another stick vegetatively. And I think it's just imagine, and all the DNA, I think there's really only one plant that's the chaya, and all the DNA is related. It's all a clone.
So it's propagation by cutting, and thus the flowers aren't fertile. They don't have fertile seeds.
Right. You can't plant the seed, but you can always plant the stick. And you have to make, when I give you the stick, it has to get dry. You can't put it in water. If you put it in water, it just turns into mush. But it doesn't want to propagate. It doesn't produce roots like that.
And so chaya then, if you want to propagate it, you cut off a cutting, let it harden off where you don't put it in water, and then just put it in the ground.
Right. You just take a stick. The place where the leaf falls off forms a little bit of a, I call it sort of a smile, and you put the lower part of the smile has to go down. One of those has to be in the ground and one out, and usually you'll get a plant from each one. And if you have a long piece, just make you have two of those little eyes. And if you don't know which way to put it in, I guess put the whole thing in, and then it'll probably, or put it on the side, and it will grow. The dot where the leaf falls off, and then it has a little C underneath it, and that C goes down, and the dot goes up. Because, I mean, it does matter how you put it in. That's through experience. I can't tell you why. And it is great. So if people are in Santa Barbara, I have not missed one for many years. I've gone to that seed swap in January, and I always bring Chaya and give it away. So if you want Chaya, I can do that. Loves the full sun. Its leaves are, they look like the size of a maple leaf, I'd say, except very green. And it's called tree spinach because you can eat it like spinach. That is, you can cook it, and it's got lots and lots of protein. It's got more protein cooked than spinach has cooked. And as I was admonishing people when I give it, when you cook it, if you cook it in water, I barely steam it myself, but keep that water, drink it if nothing else, if you don't want to keep it to make a soup. I use it in soup, but it has more protein than the leaf. And we've been doing experiment, sort of a chemist who looks at isotopic cues in plants and animals to look at how we can identify what we eat. I don't know if you know, you can look at ancient bones and tell how much protein they ate in their diet, how much fish they might have had. You can convert it to what kind of protein it is, vegetable or animal or fish. And you can also look at, that's through nitrogen, you can also look at another isotope, which is strontium, and know something about the water they drank, if it was local or not. Very interesting things. But this plant has protein equivalent to like if you ate meat. Very high, very good component of protein. But it also has calcium and C, and the calcium is very high as well. So people like me that are starting to struggle with osteopenia and osteoporosis, it's a very good product for that.
Interesting. So it's very nutritious.
Yeah, it has just about everything. I don't think that there's, I think you could probably say, as far as food, it's one of the best vegetables around. I mean, if that Popeye knew about it, he wouldn't be opening his can of spinach. He'd be looking for his Chaya. And wherever it grows here at your Chaya versus the one in the Cayo or Tikal or Palenque or wherever you eat Chaya, it's all the same. It's all from the same source.
That is amazing. And what's interesting is it was a very hardy plant, at least in my experience. I'm pretty good with plants, and I had it in a pot for a few years. Then I finally got it in the ground, and it is flourishing and thriving, and it's probably now 6 years old maybe? So it is a perennial plant. It will continue to grow. And depending on the climate, what climate does it like?
Well, of course, it prefers to have it warm all the time. And so my Chaya here loses its leaves and becomes very dormant. I don't live in an area that freezes, but you have to take care of it. But it's interesting, did it stay small in the pot?
It did.
It just sort of understands it doesn't have a place to go, so it.
I know, I felt bad, and finally I'm like, I'm putting you in the ground, and it just has taken off. And there'll be a picture of it on this podcast episode, so people can see. It's a beautiful plant, and it's very unusual. People always say, "What is that?" They have a hard time identifying it. It's not that common in this area, at least.
Yeah, no. I have a friend that's thinking that she wants to start planting it to make it available. And you can make a green drink with it. In Quintana Roo, they use Chaya and everything. They cook it in their tamales. They put it in there. Even in their tortillas, they eat it as a side dish. They put it in their drinks. So you can get just a regular drink, whirled very fine. They must really use their blender. And they'll add it to water with some sugar. But I've actually used it in orange juice or lemon juice, and it's that I like also.
And some of the literature or some of the information online does warn about a toxin in the leaves. Can you address that for our listeners?
Well, apparently it volatilizes very easily, and I don't like eating it fresh. You just eat it. It has no taste for some reason. It's better cooked and in juices. But you're not going to be poisoned by it. But you do have to realize that it is a euphorbia, and most euphorbias can be very toxic. When I pick it, I try to remember to wear gloves because I do have a reaction in my eyes or any your mucous membrane to that. It just gets it itchy.
So it's kind of that milky sap can be a bit allergy causing for some people.
Right, and it's temporary, and it's not something. Doesn't scare me. In fact, I just worked with my Chaya plants. I just cut them off. They grow very well. Mine are more than 8 years, obviously, because I gave you one. But they grow really, really tall, and the best thing for me to do is to chop them off. And I mean, some of mine are getting really woody, but it is a bush. And in the Maya forest, it grows very round, with leaves everywhere.
And so it would be in the understory of the food forest.
Well, it would never be in the understory. It'd be out in the open. It's a field. I mean, it needs full sun, full sun. So it would be in an area that was cleared. And when you see the wild Chaya, it grows at the roadside, those kinds of places. And it grows very tall.
How tall does it get?
Wild Chaya is very, very tall. This one, well, it's certainly taller than I am, but that's only because I think that we're here in an area that doesn't get as much sun as the tropics, so it grows more gangly here than it does in the Maya forest.
And so the Chaya has vitamin C, antioxidants, calcium, protein, and iron in it. And is it used as medicine in any way in the Mayan culture?
They claim that it strengthens your fingernails and lessens the effects of diabetes, but I mean I don't know. I'd have to go look up what Balik says. He would be the best source on these plants of the ethnobotany of the Maya.
Would you say then the Chaya, you steam it just how you would steam regular chard or something like that?
Yeah, barely, because it will wilt quickly. Don't throw away the water. It's so important. Drink that water if you don't want to use it in soup. I always save the vegetable water that I steam with for soups or for making my rice or making my beans or whatever. But I never throw it away. And I learned from Henry Schwartz, this colleague, this geochemist. He's tested the water has more protein than the leaf, and the leaf has more protein than almost any other thing, and he does agree that it has everything else, the calcium and whatever. But what's interesting about the protein is that it's a hard thing for people to get protein. Most things, especially in the New World, there were no domesticated animals, so most things moved around, and I would like to know what the contribution of Chaya is to the protein quotient of the Maya.
I was a little bit scared off by some of the online information about Chaya that says boil it 20 minutes. Don't boil
really?
it. Yeah, boil 20 minutes. I think it even said don't keep the water and don't cook in aluminum, which I think we're not supposed to cook in aluminum anyway. But
where is the authority? Well, the web is its own authority, and you just have to look at that. The proof to me is going to Quintana Roo and seeing how many different ways they use the Chaya, and without any question of the value of it. You don't need to take iron pills if you're eating Chaya.
You are the Chaya ambassador.
I'm the Chaya ambassador, and happy to be so.
Anything else you would want people listening to know about this Chaya tree spinach?
One of my forest gardeners told me another way and prepared it. You make those kale chips. We roasted it on a comal. It breaks up into like little squares, but then you use that on things, your bread or your pizza, or put it in a salad. I just eat it. But I do like it whirled in juice.
That's just the raw leaf.
The raw leaf, you just dump them in, and if you have water, then you use it with water. You'll have to taste it. It probably doesn't taste that good. You have to add something.
Talking to you about Chaya, it reminds me of moringa. Have you heard of that plant?
Yeah.
Similar high protein, high nutrition. I think plants like this are going to be very valuable to us in the future.
Yeah, they're really true, and really spreading it around, being an ambassador. I'm glad you told me that. I'm going to call myself that. That's good, because I think it's something, it's so easy, and like if you could do it in a pot, then you don't have to have a farm or any kind of property. The important criteria, though, is sun.
Drought tolerance? What about water needs?
I'd say it is drought tolerant. I mean, because the Maya forest we have up to 4 months almost no rain. So it obviously in its native habitat can survive that. But there is a lot more moisture in general in the Maya forest than there is here. And so I think you have to be attentive to it. It's not going to require lots of water, but it's going to have something.
Yeah, I'm not watering as much now because of the drought conditions, but it's flourishing. It's lovely.
Mine I wouldn't call flourishing because it grows so gangly, but I mean, it never fails. That's what counts. I can still eat it.
Yeah. Oh. Well, anything else you'd like to tell people about Chaya?
Well, I think that being an ambassador of Chaya, we need to see more people put it in their pots, in their yards, and start eating it, not just looking at it.
Where can people find out more about your work?
I have a website. My main university one is MARC for the Mesoamerican Research Center, marc.ucsb.edu. But Annabelle Ford, ANABELFORD, I don't see any other person of that name on the web yet. So if you're really at a mystery, if you could spell my name right, then you will find it. El Pilar is another way. And I welcome people coming to visit. I'm working on a lot of plant data here in Santa Barbara, so if there are volunteers interested in working with me on those things, I'm checking lists right now that I need to have as an appendix in a book. And it's really important to have the right genus, species, and looking up the authorities. So I've been doing that. Just plenty to learn, both on the domesticated and the what I call the domesticated landscape. And that's how we found Chaya, really, is because the Maya weren't as concerned about domesticating plants as understanding the landscape and using it to their best needs.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for your work, and thanks for introducing me to Chaya.
Well, my privilege.
Thanks for listening to The Plant Report. The Plant Report is produced by Jill Cloutier and is a project of Sustainable World Radio. For more podcasts about plants, permaculture, and ecology, visit our website, sustainableworldradio.com, and you can also find us on iTunes, Facebook, and Twitter. The Plant Report is created for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any health condition. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to thank the plants for everything they do.